From 1950 until today, world GDP quintupled from 7 trillion to 35 trillion US dollars. Turn on the TV any time of the day, read a paper or magazine, and you are bombarded with news of money, celebrities, cars and cosmetics of one kind or another. We live in a society obsessed with immortality and get-rich-quick schemes. And we judge our well-being by a formula created in 1884 by a business journalist from his basement office on Wall Street? That's right, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the most widely quoted benchmark of the fortunes of the world, is a list of 30 companies which has changed 48 times over 125 years and goes up and down with investor emotion, more influenced by who wins the Super Bowl than wars, famine, and natural disaster. At the same time, the state of the natural systems which make our lives possible has been relegated to the lifestyle section as if they are some sort of curiosity or someone else's responsibility. Surely something is wrong when our happiness is more heavily influenced by money and material than anything else. You bet something is wrong. 40% of the world's population still lives on less than $2 US a day, while cows in Europe and Japan are subsidized up to $7 a day. And those same poor people have little or no access to modern healthcare, education, or technology. Forget about iPods and Blackberries. 1.1 billion people in developing countries don't have access to adequate water, and 2.6 billion people lack basic sanitation. Thousands of children die every day from easily treatable waterborne disease. Sure, globalization has brought many benefits, but primarily for those of us privileged to live in countries wealthy from exploitation of others less fortunate and the environment. Every life support system, our forests and oceans and farmlands, have been degraded and in some cases are facing severe decline or collapse. Where's the genius in that? As free market guru Milton Friedman famously said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Adam Smith, the father of modern market economics, also recognized limits to growth as populations rise and resources become increasingly scarce. As responsible people, we must ask ourselves, at what cost do we continue to liquidate our resources and build our wealth in ways harmful to public health and the environment? To what extent has our increase in material wealth been through exploitation of others? Are we meeting our responsibilities to future generations, those less fortunate, and other species? Do we have the right to threaten the future of life on planet Earth? To answer these questions, we need only look at some troubling trends that have occurred over the past 60 years while world GDP quintupled. There's a lot of ground to cover. I can do little more than give you a high flyover, but tighten your seatbelts. It's quite the reality check. Today, half of the world's forests are gone, with the bulk of destruction happening since industrialization began. Between 2000 and 2005 alone, the net loss in forested area worldwide was bigger than Germany and nearly the size of Japan. We lose 13 million hectares of productive forest land every year. That's alarming, especially when you consider how enormously important forests are, not only to our economy, but to life. Forests provide food, shelter, medicine, and so much more. They are the lungs of the planet, absorbing pollutants and providing life-giving oxygen. They are essential to a predictable climate and water supply, and they provide habitat for some of our most iconic animals, polar bears, giant panda, and caribou, all threatened with extinction. Just to keep up with the demand for disposable chopsticks in China, roughly 20 million trees are cut down each year. Or how about this? In North America, 28% of landfill space is taken up by paper and packaging used only once. With so much at stake, one would think we would be managing Canadian forests more sustainably. And yet, every year a net area twice the size of Toronto is lost as productive forest. We foolishly continue to clear-cut large areas and ship raw logs overseas rather than producing value-added wood products here at home. And then we recklessly fail to properly replant for the future. Did I miss something in my business class about the benefits of liquidating our assets? A quick look at mangroves, a very special kind of forest, underscores my point. Mangroves dominate 3/4 of tropical coastlines and subtropical tidal areas, providing essential buffers between saltwater and freshwater. They are among the most productive and biologically complex ecosystems on Earth, and yet a third of the world's mangroves are now gone, mostly sacrificed to golf courses, hotels, shrimp farms, and ports. Thailand, the world's largest exporter of shrimp, has lost over 60% of its mangroves due to clearing for shrimp farms alone. The world's oceans and coastlines aren't doing much better. The journal Science published a study in 2006 predicting that at prevailing rates the world would run out of wild-caught seafood by 2048 as a result of overfishing, pollution, and other human damage. Since the onset of industrialized fishing in the 1950s, the entire world fishery has been reduced to less than 10%. As larger fish species are wiped out, the next smaller ones are targeted, and as the cycle continues, ecosystems become unhealthy and unstable and more vulnerable to pollution, disease, and invasive species. Canadian fisheries expert Daniel Pauly warns that if this continues, our children will be eating jellyfish. To make a bad situation worse, we continue to allow the damaging practice of dragging huge nets through the water and along the seabed. Many species, cynically called bycatch, are injured and killed, damaging their species and the overall health of ocean life. In the North Sea alone, discards are estimated at over 800,000 tons a year, the equivalent of 1/3 of the total weight caught annually. Does it make sense to decimate dolphin and turtle populations to catch more sardines or tuna? With more and more people competing for less and less fish and dumping more and more toxic waste into our oceans, all major fisheries are declining and some are approaching collapse. The effects of pollution and degradation are perhaps most striking in coral populations. Described as the rainforests of the seas because of the thousands of species they support, coral reefs provide us with food and medicine and protect our coastal areas from waves and storms. According to the World Meteorological Organization, tropical coral reefs yield more than $30 billion annually in global goods and services, and yet 40% are gone or are in danger of disappearing, and others are severely threatened, including Australia's magnificent Great Barrier Reef. The state of agriculture is not any more encouraging. It's not just the loss of prime land to paving and development, it's much more. Every year the world produces more than enough food to meet everyone's needs, and yet many lack sufficient food. The problem is that we have overconsumption in some places and food shortages and starvation elsewhere. The average daily calorie intake of an adult male from North America is 3,300 calories, exceeding recommended intake by 20 to 25%. In Algeria, he struggles to maintain an average rate of 1,700 calories per day, 20 to 25% below standard. While we gorge ourselves here, others struggle to survive. Industrial agriculture is simply unsustainable. It destroys soil and seed diversity and pollutes air and water. Wasteful water practices are shrinking water supplies at an alarming rate. China and India, 50% of the world's population, are already experiencing critical shortages. Increased energy costs and climate change threaten even greater disruptions. And as food prices skyrocket, there will be social unrest. There's more. Another major crisis stemming from industrial agriculture is the decline of bees and other pollinating insects around the world. Since 1990, honeybee populations have dropped more than 25%, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service lists over 50 pollinator species as threatened or endangered. Who cares about bees anyway? No one, if we want to live on potatoes and turnips. Honeybees provide 80% of our pollination services, pollinating more than 100 food crops, including most fruits, vegetables, and nuts. They are responsible for at least $8 billion in agricultural crops each year. The decline in pollinating insects is already so dramatic in some places, such as parts of China, that pollination is being done by hand. That simply is not a long-term option for anyone. But hey, I understand turnips are delicious with a handful of sautéed grass from your local golf course. In the United States alone, golf courses cover nearly 1 million hectares and soak up nearly 4 billion gallons of water daily. They use tons of pesticides and fertilizers that contribute to water and air pollution. Golf is a $50 billion per year business doing considerable damage. The meat and dairy industries aren't any healthier. Both produce huge volumes of polluting organic waste each year, more than the world's entire human population, nearly 13 billion tons. The water and land required to produce 1 pound of meat is roughly 7 times that required to produce 1 pound of vegetable protein. The heavy use of antibiotics in industrial agriculture is another growing health crisis. Agriculture accounts for 70% of all antibiotic and drug use in the United States, and many antibiotics have become ineffective as pathogens have become resistant. This widespread drug use creates drug-resistant bacteria that subsequently go into our environments and into our mouths. Another troubling agricultural issue is the loss of seed diversity. Since the dawn of agriculture, farmers have preserved those seeds most successful in their environments. They understood that genetic variety was essential to food and survival. Since the beginning of the 20th century, about 75% of the genetic diversity of agricultural crops has been lost, primarily because commercially preferred varieties are selected for uniformity in shipping rather than nutrition or hardiness. This is happening despite the fact genetic diversity boosts the total crop values on American farms alone by some $520 million a year. Every biology student, every farmer, and every smart investor knows about the benefits of diversification. That is, if you put all your eggs in one basket, you increase your risk. And then there's our indiscriminate use of more and more chemicals to protect our crops in a deadly cycle of fighting nature rather than learning from it. After decades of releasing tons and tons of deadly chemicals into our food and our environment, people are still experiencing famine and crop loss, and the health and environmental consequences have been enormous. Already, more than 400 species of crop pests have developed resistance to one or more of the pesticides used to control them. So what's our answer? We patent biological materials so that a few multinationals can make more money at the risk of public health and food security. With all of our wisdom and knowledge, we create corn containing an herbicide-resistant gene, spray it with toxic poisons, and eat it even though every other organism that comes into contact with it dies. I don't know about you, but I don't want to eat strawberries with tobacco or human genes. And more than my health, I worry about what happens when this Pandora's box of genetically altered organisms escapes into the environment. Beyond agriculture, there are many other reasons plant diversity is important to us. We rely on plants for food and shelter and pharmaceuticals too. The UN Environment Program and the Convention on Biological Diversity tell us that at least 40% of the world's economy and 80% of the needs of the poor are derived from biological resources. 74% of plant-derived drugs worldwide have been discovered through investigation of ethno-medicinal uses of plants. The richer the diversity of life, the greater the opportunity for new medical discoveries economic development, and adaptive responses to challenges such as climate change. However, according to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, species are disappearing at rates 1,000 times faster than normal. An average of 137 species are driven into extinction every day, or 50,000 each year. Half of the world's primates, most of our large predators, and multitudes of birds and valuable plants disappearing. We have no idea what medicines could have been derived from the thousands of plants that have already gone extinct. Why risk losing more? More importantly, the loss of genetic diversity, plants and animals, could lead to the collapse of entire ecosystems and our food production system. However, some of the most sobering environmental trends today relate to climate change. Atmospheric CO2 concentrations are rapidly rising and higher than any time in the past million years. Until the Industrial Revolution, the previous 600,000 years experienced a rise of atmospheric CO2 concentrations of only 22 parts per million. However, in the last 2 centuries, the rise in atmospheric CO2 was 100 parts per million. Industrialization clearly is changing the Earth's climate. So what's the big deal anyway? Sure, the climate is warming, but couldn't that be a good thing? I'd love to grow papayas in my backyard. The problems with climate change go far beyond increasing the frequency of extreme weather events or changes in local climate. Increased heat is altering the range and seasonality of infectious diseases and pests, such as malaria and the mountain pine beetle. It's disturbing food production systems and altering biological systems faster than species can adapt. Caribou and polar bears gone, maple syrup too, and don't forget the bees in most of our food crops. Burning fossil fuels has begun to affect the fundamental requirements of life. According to the World Health Organization, the global warming that has occurred since the 1970s was already causing 140,000 excess deaths a year by the year 2004. Melting ice caps, rising sea levels, droughts and floods have launched an entirely new class of refugees, environmental refugees. It's either share our wealth and technology with poorer nations or deal with increased conflict and migration as people struggle to survive. I can tell you that the scientific evidence has insurance company executives peeing in their pants. Climate change combined with human overuse and contamination is causing dangerous declines in fresh water worldwide. At the same time, the water supplies in glaciers and snow cover have begun to decline. Many other supplies are irretrievably contaminated. Because of agriculture, urbanization, and overuse, many great rivers no longer reach the oceans in the dry season. For example, the Yellow, the Ganges, and the Nile, and the Colorado, sacrificed to desert fountains and golf courses. To add insult to injury, every day 2 million tons of human waste is disposed of in natural waterways. Because of inadequate treatment of wastewater, or none at all, nearly 1 million people in the world do not have access to safe drinking water. In addition to pollution, overuse is a major problem. Many underground aquifers around the world have been overused and are irretrievably contaminated. For example, in Russia and China and the Middle East, where they don't need a new reason for conflict. Mismanagement also has caused the loss of half of the world's wetlands since 1900. We're not only threatening hundreds of species dependent on these habitats and risking recreational revenue of approximately $60 billion annually in the U.S. alone, but we're also risking important protection from floods and erosion. Wetlands soak up and slowly release floodwaters and filter sediments, providing cleaner lakes, rivers, and streams, and safer drinking water. Finally, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has linked climate change with increasing intensity and variability of precipitation, increasing flooding and drought, which will affect the stability of our food supply. Many people believe that water will be a major cause of increasing conflict in the future. Shipping designer water bottles from Iceland to China or to Canada clearly isn't the answer. The challenge to our generation is to find ways to live within our means and ensure a healthy, sustainable future for ourselves and for generations to come. The trends are clear. Our current practices threaten human and environmental health, economic stability, and global security. They also make a compelling case for a new kind of development, one that is fairer, healthier, and more responsible. There is no legitimate social, environmental, or economic argument that supports our wasteful and short-sighted behavior. Scientists overwhelmingly understand this to be true, and your clients, colleagues, and children are increasingly asking, what are we going to do about it? More bluntly, they're asking, what are you going to do about it? Before I offer some thoughts on your professional opportunities, allow me please a few minutes to propose some important personal actions. It's not a complete list. There's much to do, but these important actions are positive, effective, and life-affirming. Let's start treating water with respect. Even in Canada, where we take for granted our abundance of water, there is much to do. We must stop using harmful chemicals on our lawns and in our gardens, dispose of leftover paint and chemicals properly, and demand the government provide these services. It's important to consume less seafood, especially species in decline and those caught by trawling. We should support local and organic agriculture and avoid food produced using harmful methods, such as pesticides, genetically modified seeds, monocultures, and intense animal confinement. Let's walk, bike, and take transit as much as possible rather than driving, and get rid of that Land Rover, please. Be a responsible and informed consumer. Support producers and suppliers who are taking serious action in support of social justice and environmental protection. Get involved in the democratic process. Encourage elected officials and governments to ban GMOs, cosmetic pesticides, and indiscriminate use of antibiotics in agriculture. Make sure politicians are creating serious climate change action plans and sticking to them. Support international fishing agreements to eliminate bycatch. Insist the forest industry adopt more sustainable standards and the government reduce wood exports to a more sustainable rate. And put your money where your mouth is. Look into your stock portfolio, your pension funds, and other investments. Are they socially and environmentally responsible? Are they funding companies that are doing harm or truly advancing human development? What excites me most about the opportunity to talk to you today is that you can do so much more than the average person through your professional activities as business executives, pension fund managers, or investment advisors. Isn't it time we stopped enriching ourselves at the expense of others and our children and theirs? I doubt many people will say no, and yet that's exactly what most of us continue to do. The Canadian stock market is heavily based on natural resource extraction. Do you, as investor, pension fund holder, investment manager, choose companies that abide by the highest operational standards for environmental health and safety, labor, and human rights? Remediation is good, but we need innovation. Do you research and promote companies offering exciting new opportunities in clean technology, wastewater treatment, and green energy? The Clean Tech Group estimates that the current value of the global market for water and wastewater treatment technologies is $270 billion, and that Asia Pacific alone will invest trillions over the next 25 years in wastewater treatment. Market Research's Renewable Energy Global Industry Guide reports the global renewable energy market reached a value of $322 billion in 2010 and forecasts a nearly 50% increase to $480 billion by 2015. Organic agriculture, once led by quirky granola eaters, is now worth 60 billion US dollars worldwide. Yes, I know, startups come and go and you are looking for the quickest and highest possible returns. But how many of you wish now that you had invested in that 1975 startup Microsoft, or Google in 1998, or in Whole Foods. Today's green startups may be as unfamiliar as Microsoft or Google were in their early days, but like many others, I wish I could find an investment advisor who was well informed on these burgeoning new sectors. One or more may very well end up being the Microsoft of solar energy, or the Google of wastewater treatment, or healthy food. Aren't persuaded by some do-gooder environmentalist? Don't take my word for it. Take it from somebody who knows how to make money, lots of money. General Electric, the sixth largest firm in the United States, is approaching environmental issues head-on with the creation of their Eco-Imagination program. The program is dedicated to research and funding towards technological solutions to global environmental issues, especially in renewable energy. GE has invested more than $850 million in renewable energy technology since 2002, directly employing nearly 5,000 people globally and creating more than 10,000 supporting jobs. Not surprising for an innovative company concerned with profit and environmental solutions, GE's investments have greatly paid off. Eco-Imagination has generated $85 billion in revenue since 2005, and sales are expected to grow twice as fast as the rest of the company. In the words of Eco-Imagination Vice President Lorraine Bolsinger, Eco-Imagination is above everything else a business strategy, one based on investing in technologies to help customers grow sustainably in a world of more stringent regulation, more resource scarcity, and higher energy costs, and we can grow sustainably too. Money isn't the only green that interests Warren Buffett either. Berkshire Hathaway has put $3 billion into General Electric and billions more into clean transportation, green energy, and sustainable building materials. Buffett may be as environmentally concerned as the next person, but I suspect he's adding to his green holdings because that's a profitable strategy. In closing, let me pose to you what many of us consider to be the biggest bet of all. The bottom line is we have two fundamental choices. We can continue on our current path, believe that the gravity of our situation has been overstated, that the trends are not really as bad as they sound, and that human ingenuity can save us in the nick of time. Or we can accept that the scientific predictions are correct, that we have serious cause for concern, and adopt healthier, more sustainable practices which don't threaten the environment or the future. What's your bet? Before you answer, consider who will pay the price if we are wrong. It's unlikely to be we privileged few living today in this prosperous part of the world. Our bet is against those less fortunate and, of course, our children and our grandchildren. So we shouldn't be surprised when those struggling for the necessities of life condemn us for putting our comforts over their need for basic health, justice, and development. After all, aren't we privileged few essentially betting their future so that we can have more stuff now? Resources aren't the problem. We possess the means to create a world where every man, woman, and child can live free of hunger and discrimination and obtain the health, education, and opportunity to reach their full potential while ensuring that human development does not squeeze other life to extinction. It's time to stop betting the future so that we can have more stuff now. So I challenge each of you, as I do myself, to get up out of our comfortable chairs and cars and homes and start building a healthier, more promising future, one which gives hope to our young people and prepares the world's citizens to work together to respond to our rapidly changing social, environmental, and economic realities. Liquidating our biological assets is beyond arrogant and reckless. It's suicidal. Like Icarus, we are recklessly flying to the sun, and we all know how that turned out. As Einstein wisely said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. Look, it's simple. If we want a healthy, prosperous, and peaceful future, we have been living on borrowed money to finance our extravagant lifestyles, and it's time to pay up. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's more to life than money and stuff and how fast we can accumulate it.